open up.
Oh, you want me to turn on? Okay.
Let me open up Board Docs if you're right with you.
Oh, okay.
Is it plugged
Open up on
in?
And you can use mine to get started if you want.
Battery?
Let's see how this goes. I should be here in just a second.
Yeah.
What is that?
Getting ready to take off to the moon.
Yeah.
T-minus.
What do I hold on to?
You just do it on loading in Board Docs now. If it doesn't work, I'll grab yours.
Okay, that's fine.
Under superintendent section to talk about the best committee.
You're getting there.
Yeah, slowly, sure.
It has been slow.
Gary, that's why we need new access points.
Yeah.
And switches.
You're proving your point, okay.
This is,
This is all part of the show.
Where do I sign? Very good planning.
The presentation is not started.
Yeah, but I'm on my laptop.
It's just really slow to come up.
So I was asking if we had a swim meet, because they, a lot of times other people are using the internet at that time.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
is-
Board Docs is loading.
That is really slow.
Yeah, well, we're getting IT presentations tonight, so
you must have my computer from these past times, because I usually have the slowest one.
I don't know what to say, okay.
Don't I?
User error though, that's all I'm saying.
It's not a,
Or that nut behind the keyboard. The loose
all
nut
right,
behind the
we're
keyboard.
ready to go, here we go. Good evening, it is 6:02 PM. It is Monday, February 6, 2023, and we're convening a regular meeting of the Cog Board of Education in the Professional Development Room of the Bonner Ray Media Center. Mr. Muccio, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Decker.
Here.
Mrs. Etter.
Here,
Mr. Suchaki.
Here.
Ms. Prowse.
Here.
Mr. Dobbins.
Here, 5 present, none absent. On behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome our students, staff, parents, and interested community members to tonight's Board of Education meeting. The board values and encourages public comment on education issues. Anyone having an interest in the actions of the board may participate during the public comments portion of the meeting. Please identify yourself on the board sign-in sheet. A copy of the board meeting agenda is available to review on our district's website. Please silence your cell phone during the meeting. And would you join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda, please?
So moved.
Mr. Suchaki moves. Ms. Etter seconds. Is there any discussion, changes, additions? Either Mr. Muccio, okay, then let's proceed to a vote, please.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mrs. Decker.
Aye.
Ms. Prowse.
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. Young for the presentations for this evening.
All right, thank you very much. We have with us our Director of IT, Mr. Robert Moore, and our IT Specialist, Mr. Matt Hartman. They are going to present some of the bigger projects that have been in motion throughout the course of this school year. They're first going to talk about the network switch project and the wireless access point project. Those both fall under the federal E-rate program. They're going to go into detail about what switches and access points are, and as well as describe the E-rate program. I know Mr. Hartman has been doing some work with a company called AI Phone, which is a system that will allow us to improve our entry of guests into our building and introduce some video technology with that particular feature as we look to upgrade that for safety and efficiency purposes. And then Mr. Moore is going to talk a little bit more about the printer and copier proposal. We've had a 5-year lease, which is at the end of its term, and he has collaborated with Mrs. Zink, Mr. Muccio, myself, Mr. Hartman, to get this project off and rolling. So I'm going to turn it over to these two gentlemen for a couple amazing presentations, I'm sure.
Sure. First, before I get started, I want to thank the board for your time on these pressing matters. I know your time is valuable and these meetings are valuable, so we appreciate the moment to express some of the projects that we're working on. I want to say thanks to the printing committee that has collaborated together on moving forward. I want to thank the Treasurer's Department for their expertise on moving forward, along with the Technology Committee, Mr. Hartman, Mr. Diedrich, and Mr. Young, all in collaborating on some of these projects. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the urgent projects that are going on in the Technology Department. Keeping in mind the notion of needs versus wants. There are some things that are wants, and then there are some things that are needs. Some of these projects we strongly feel are needs more than wants. So we're kind of going to go over where we are, where we would like to be, and how we get there. I know the first slide, I memorized the first slide, so that one is the switches. If you see this box here, this is a switch, and what it does is it kind of navigates the traffic through the school. So anything that gets to the internet, anything that needs to talk to each other goes through this box here. That's phones, computers, Wi-Fi, cameras, now the HVAC system. Anything that goes out to the internet, gets internet coming in, eventually comes through this box. So you see how important these are. If one of these go down, everything that's plugged into it also goes down. That's phones, that's cameras, that's anything that is on the network then goes down if this box goes down. And that happened at the beginning of the school year when we had our electrical issue. One of the core switches in the district went down. Luckily, we were able to migrate those things over to other switches. But as you run out of these ports, that becomes less and less likely that you can just move something over. So this is vital. If these go down, the network goes down. If that were to happen, we would probably have to go out and look to purchase one, configure it, and then get it installed. Depending on supply chain, it could be days, it could be a week or so. So I'm knocking on whatever this is. Hopefully nothing else goes down. Our current fleet of switches are unsupported. They're at the end of life. I think the last Cisco switches that we had in were put in 2010. When we were troubleshooting the electrical issue, there was one that we had in the elementary room that was so far advanced in its age that it couldn't talk to the one in the basement, and there was this ancient code that we had to find online in order to get it talking again with collaborations with NeoNet. So that's where we are with our switches. As I mentioned before, there's certain areas where we're just running out of these ports. There's a couple of switches in that area, and they're all being used. And as we add phones, as we add other things to the network, we're going to need more of these ports. So the age is of concern, along with the number of switches that we have.
How many do we have presently?
Right now, we have 14 network switches. We have some that are on the edge, but the vital ones that we are talking about in our network closets, we have about 14. Next is the Wi-Fi or the access points, and we'll talk about the whole system in general. If you look up there, that's how your Chromebooks are connecting to the internet. This is connected into this here. and that's sending the signal out to where you get your Wi-Fi from. Our system currently is at the end of life, and our current access point system can't be upgraded because it's out of date. So there's a controller that is kind of the brain that controls the rest of these access points. If that goes down, they all go down. And we can't just buy another controller because that controller is not compatible with these older access points. So we would still have to replace all the access points anyway. The same thing as if an access point dies, we can't just go buy another one to replace it because that one is a newer one and it won't talk to our current controller. So we're going to need a total replacement of our Wi-Fi system. Again, we also have some classrooms that don't have an access point into it. And in our discussions with the different vendors, each classroom should have their own access point. So what happens is if there's a classroom that doesn't have an access point, it's then trying to use the next access point over for that classroom, which is then overloading that access point. So we don't have enough access points, and our system that we have now is currently aged out. It's working, but again, if the controller goes down, Wi-Fi goes down, Chromebooks are not on the Wi-Fi, that could be potentially catastrophic to the educational process.
When was this put in, the access point?
Ours was put in 2016, I believe, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the different vendors that possibly could replace the system. And I also want to say that the switch project and the access point project, even though they're two separate projects, you want to implement them the same way because you don't want to mismatch pieces and parts. So if we had a solution where they were the same manufacturer, eventually we could log into a web page and see all of our switches along with all of our access points and manage them that way versus what's wrong? Is it the access point or is it the switch? Let's log into the switches and take a look at those. It's not there. Let's log into the access point. Inefficient financially as well as time-wise. So we've been talking over the last few months with different vendors. We've also discussed things with our ITC, NeoNet, and different school districts around to see what they're using, what they like, and what they don't like, as well as who came out to see us and do a walkthrough through the building. So the four main players are Extreme Networks, Aruba, which is owned by HP, Cisco Meraki, and Arista. We've had multiple discussions with them, and some of them have come out a couple times. The first one is Extreme Networks, and that's who we're using currently with our current access point system. They're the ones who let us know that our system is out of date and no longer supported. Some of the things that we liked and some of the pros with Extreme was their cost. Compared to some of the others, they were a better cost for us. They also had a cloud option and a graphical user interface, which means instead of programming the devices, we could log into a web portal and do what we need from that way. Some of the cons, quickly obsolete. Again, our system was put in 2016 and the whole thing is obsolete. I went to a directors conference in November talking with some other districts that use Extreme. They had theirs put in 2018 and they were told that they were obsolete as well. So a system that goes obsolete in 3 years from this major investment didn't seem like the right choice. Along with that, a lot of their switches are hard to manage. That's coming from some other districts, and it's hard to upgrade as what we're seeing. If it was easier to upgrade, we could possibly do pieces, parts throughout the years to keep it going, but just total replacing the whole thing every few years didn't seem like the right thing to do. Next is Aruba. Some of their pros is, again, they have a cloud option, they have the graphical user interface, they have a permanent license for their device, so everything works as it should throughout the remainder of how long you have it, which was nice. Some of the cons we didn't like was the price. We were expecting them to possibly be lower, but talking to other school districts, they said, yeah, we like their stuff, it's pricier than what we thought, but it was nice. But we didn't like the fact that it was high in price as well. I went out for a presentation at their office near North Olmsted, and that easily could have been done over Zoom. I thought I was going out to play with their devices, get my hands on some things, and we ended up doing a Zoom call. So I drove out there to do a Zoom call with the presenter who was somewhere else. And last but not least, or another point is, I saw them using a rival brand in their office. So if you have a guest coming out, if I go to tour Coca-Cola, I don't want to see a Pepsi machine in the corner. So that was not highly in their favor, and it just lacked some features that we were asking for. There were some things that were high on our list that they just couldn't do. Next, we get to Cisco Meraki. I came from a Cisco district. We are currently a Cisco district. My formal training is on Cisco. They're the gold standard of the industry. But as we started talking to other NeoNet members and other districts, they were adamant about their costs increase. And in talking to some other districts similar to our size, if we were to go with Cisco Meraki, we wouldn't have any money for anything else to do, including E-rate. So the cost was a big thing, and it wasn't people were saying, hey, they're a little bit higher. People were saying they are extremely high. The pot of money that IT has, it would have easily eaten half of that. So the cost is really what had us opened up to looking at some other products.
And you don't think there would have been any way to negotiate a better price with them? Seeing that you said they were the gold standard?
Absolutely not. They
Absolutely
are
not.
purposely going higher. In fact, we even asked them just to come out and take a look at our district, which the other vendors oblige, just come out, take a look, see what we have. They put together a proposal of $40,000 just to come out and tell us what they're going to sell us. That cost might be the same cost as the wireless. And also that time frame that they set out for this project didn't match up with the E-rate program. By the time they would have had their guys come out and take a look at what we were potentially purchasing, the E-rate program season would have been over.
Okay.
So that was kind of the last straw on them. They are easy to use. They have a cloud option, but it's just their pricing. Talking to some others, it's almost like they are looking for Fortune 500 bigger companies versus smaller schools. Maybe LA or Chicago school districts, but they're really not thinking about us that much.
Okay.
So that brings us to Arista. There was a lot of things that we really liked about them. One of the things is that they're similar to Cisco, so similar that some of their current staff came from Cisco, and they got sued because things were so closely knit together. They won that lawsuit, but Cisco was saying your command line and the programming that you're using is so similar to us, it's too similar, you can't do that, and luckily Arista won that. They're used by NeoNet, which is our ITC, so one of the concerns would be is if we had one certain vendor connecting to NeoNet, would they be compatible? Their core switches, which would connect to our core switch, is Arista as well, so it would be the same like connection. Not only that, but talking to Arista, they're going to option, if whoever wins the bid, would then option that out to NeoNet for the installation as well. So there's a high likely that NeoNet will be assisting us with connecting to NeoNet. The pricing was great. So far, the early projections on that, and because we didn't get any official bids or quotes in yet, but we're looking at about half of what, less than half of what Cisco Meraki would have been. So the price is much more fiscally responsible than what some of the other vendors were. They have a graphical user interface, which was very nice, easy to use. Their wireless system doesn't have a controller, so that brain that I was talking about, if it goes down, they all go down. Their access point, one of their access points acts as that brain. If that goes down, you just assign it to another access point. You can also set it in the mornings where they all check each other to make sure they're ready to go. If there's one that's down, it'll send us a report back that this one is down. So in a case of testing where the wireless absolutely needs to be up, they can check each other beforehand to let us know if they're ready to go or not.
Yeah, but no auto failover, it sounds like, has to be manual failover.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
I would say if one goes down, it would be nice to have that, but we would probably do a thorough check. If we had one go down, that would trigger us to get into action pretty quickly.
What's the life of these access points, and how many do we currently have, and how many would we replace with?
Currently, we have about 85, and we're requesting enough to have every classroom have one, and a few extra, just in case if one dies, we could then replace it with another one. The Arista products also come with a 5-year manufacturing warranty, so if one dies, they replace it for us. And that's about the first half of the life of that switch. We expect them to go 8 to 10 years, but we would have some protection on if one were to fail. Not only that, but with support, we would get support from Arista, that's included in their agreement, but we would also have support from Neonet, being that they use the same switches in their department. So we would be the primary caretakers of them, but if things got out of hand, if things really went wrong, or if one just went down, we could get it replaced by Arista, and we would have Neonet backing us up as well.
And did you indicate what the rate of obsolescence is on these relative to some of the others that you had talked about? Is this a higher or low obsolescence rate?
We did talk to them. We told them our situation with our wireless, and they said the best rate for these is every 5 to 6 years start replacing some of them. So in year 6, we may say, let's replace 10 of these with newer access points versus doing it all at once. So that's something that we did bring up to them. That was a troublesome fact of doing it all at once, and they said they would oblige that. They said even with the change in technology, 4 to 5 years of changing, not of the access points, but the advancements and the technology of the wireless, that should be sufficient for us. So it won't be a total change, it'll be a incremental change.
I understand this is a forward-looking question, but do we have any insight as to whether they would continue to support their older access points as if we were to embark on a periodic upgrading? In other words, would they continue to support the oldest ones, and knowing that if they were the successful vendor, that we're going to be upgrading with like equipment?
I did ask them that if we had a situation where we had, say, year 8 when we had the access points and we still wanted some support, we would then have to enter in a service agreement with them. But that was the same with all of the different vendors involved.
So at about year 8, they start looking for service agreements to support their existing equipment?
Yeah.
Roughly speaking. Okay, thank you.
So those are the main points. The only downside, or there's 2 downsides of Arista, is you can't stack the switches. So if you had a bunch of these in large networks, you can have them act as one, and that makes things more efficient. Because we're such a small network, and each closet is probably going to have a maximum of 3 or 4, that's really not an issue for us. Also, for the graphical user interface, we would have to re-up that license for it after year 5. But other than Aruba, that's the same with all of them, and the Aruba comes with the high cost anyway. So, and then I asked them, I said, say with that beautiful graphical user interface, say if year 6 comes along and we just don't want it, or we don't have the means to get it, could we still use the switches? And he said, yeah, absolutely. It's just you wouldn't log into them and click and change things that way. You would operate them as a normal switch where you would SSH in and then use the command line. So the switches would still work. We just wouldn't have the graphical interface comes with it. But hopefully we don't get to that point, but if we do, we will be prepared for it. So how do we assist in purchasing these things? And that's where the E-rate program comes in. It's a federal program that gives money to schools and libraries based on their free and reduced lunch numbers. So it's a percentage of how many total students you have, along with how many free or reduced lunch students you have. Right now, we're about 50%. So what that means is if there's a project that's $50,000, through E-rate, we would pay $25,000, and then the federal program would then pay for that other part of it. There's really two main parts to E-rate. There's the 470 and the 471. The 470 is a call out to all the vendors who participate in the E-rate program, saying this is what Cuyahoga Heights is looking for. So we've completed our 470 and we turned it in. That went to all the vendors, and then they're able to bring in their quotes, their bids to us to see if they are awarded this project. Once a winner is decided, then the 471 goes out. That's where we tell the FCC, this is who we've awarded this to. These are the specifics that we're looking to purchase for them at the specific price. Then a reviewer then works with us if they have any questions that says, hey, can you itemize this anymore? Can you explain this cost? And then once we've gone through that process, they award it as accepted or denied. If it's accepted, then we proceed with the purchases and the installation of the hardware. Usually the only time I've seen them deny is if a district misses a deadline. But hopefully that won't be the case here. So we also have a bidding process from the board policy that anything over $50,000 triggers a bidding process. We are hoping to go through our board's sealed bidding process along with the E-rate process. So what we're looking to do is the 470's gone out. All the vendors that see our 470 and respond are then sent into the sealed bidding process where we use our board policy to produce these sealed bids, select a winner. The winner of that sealed bidding process is then put on the 471 for E-rate, and then that is sent off to the E-rate program for approval. So we're really running the E-rate program and our own bidding process congruently together to fulfill our board policy and fulfill the requirements for the E-rate process. So it's the technology committee's hope that the board will recommend two bidding processes, one for the wireless access point project and another one for the network switches, which I believe you all have the documentation for. Any questions on the wireless or the network switches?
You had alluded before that there's like a window that you have to use the E-rate for or something. Can you explain that?
Yep, the 471, that's where you say, hey, this is who we're going with, this is the specific funds that we're looking for. That's due March 28th. So we're hoping to have this bidding process done by the middle of March. That will give us plenty of time to prepare the documentation and the paperwork for the E-rate program.
Or we have to wait a whole year, or is that just the E-rate is gone?
If we miss that end of March deadline, we can apply for a 90-day extension. There's no guarantee that they would give you that extension. If they don't, or if you blow past that as well, yeah, you would have to wait another year for the following E-rate year.
You'd said earlier, I believe, on the switch conversation that we have 11 switches currently?
We have 14.
Oh, I'm sorry, 14. So how many would we propose to replace it with? 14 or more?
We would want to replace all 14. We would still use some of our former fleet for cameras, and that is because there have been, in recent history, districts who have plugged in their cameras to their E-rate funded network switches, and the E-rate reviewer came back and said, you're not supposed to do that, even though there was no training that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. You need to pay us back the percentage of that switch that you plugged those cameras in. So what we would do is, if we have a closet of 2 current switches, we would put 2 newer switches into that closet and use one of the former switches for the cameras. That would be our switch, and we could do whatever we would want to. We just can't plug them into the Arista switch.
Would that be forever, or like? is that some-
After 5 years, it's yours, and you can plug whatever you would like into it. Talking with some other districts, they still plug their cameras into the newer switches, and they said if they get word that a reviewer's coming down the road, they're going to quickly unplug them and plug them back into the older switch.
Okay, then.
And then, so they're technically two projects, so I know like Treatham has one, but
Yep.
since they're technically two, does the E-rate, do we get that 50% for both?
Yes, yeah. We would, for the E-rate purposes, there are two separate projects, but the manufacturer that has been designated for that, both projects are the same. So the same vendors will then bid on both of those projects, knowing that they're intersected together.
Is there a minimum number of bids we have to have?
For the E-rate project, no. For our board project with the sealed bid, the answer is no.
There's not a minimum. So one person could bid, and that might be all we consider.
It's like playing Price is Right. So if one person gets up there, you win the fridge. If you bid right.
We bid right. Okay.
The next thing that we'll talk about is we've all been working on our copying and printing services. Our agreement is up at the end of this year. The fleet is about 5 years old, and we're on a current leasing agreement. Some of the things that we're looking to do is reduce the fleet, hopefully from 11 to 10, and that is based on the documentation that we got from the usage report. We're looking at a 3 to 5 year agreement. If we choose a new vendor, or if we stay with the current one, which currently got bought out, that's a new change for us no matter what. So we would like to see the difference in how much money we would save between a 3 and 5 year deal, and if we go with a 3 year deal, if that's possible, how does that service go for those years? So those are a few things that are important to us. The group is in unison that we definitely want to keep paper cut, so that is something that we would like to require because it saved the district so much money on reducing printing and giving us the documentation that we need to make decisions as far as printing. We've also talked about an eFax solution. Right now, we're paying for a line coming into the building that the vendor, the phone vendor, doesn't have to support anymore. The cost is also going to exponentially raise because they don't want to be in that business anymore. So an eFax solution would allow us to still conduct faxes at a much cheaper rate than having the old school phone line coming in.
How much faxing do we do?
Not much, but we're still paying for that line for those few faxes. So going to an eFax will eliminate that cost for that phone line that's designated for faxing.
Do we need to fax anymore?
We do because of, I believe the nurse sends faxes regularly with information on it.
Isn't that also our analog line? So if the digital phones were to go down, that's where I believe our analog phones, our landlines, the old style, still comes through that fax line.
And then we have a separate analog line that's just for faxing. So we're paying a certain rate on that line. We would still have the line for if the digital phones go down, but that dedicated line just for faxing, and we don't do a whole lot of faxing. We still do need to fax, but we could potentially reduce that cost by getting rid of that line and going to e-faxing.
Aren't some printers able to fax without actually having a fax?
Listening to
Machine?
some of the vendors, we would have the ability to fax from the fax machine, but we would also be able to fax from the workstations as well.
And what is PaperCut? I'm not familiar with that.
It's a software that kind of manages the printing server. So a couple of things that it does is if I am a student or even a staff member, you go to print, let's say you're printing a document for a meeting that you're going to and there's 20 people in that meeting. you send it to the printer, it prints the 20 copies. Then you realize that you've made an error on page 30. There's a misspell. So you change that misspell, and then you send it to the printer again. There's another 30 pages. Then you realize, one's the wrong color. I'm supposed to change that color. So there goes another 30 pages. You've now printed an exponential amount of pages just for this one meeting. With PaperCut, you send something to the printer, it holds it there, it's waiting for you. You realize your mistake, you change it, you resend it. You can cancel that first job, excuse me, before it's printed, and then just print the version that you're looking for. So it saves money.
I can show you a sample report. I get one every month, so I can show you what it actually looks like, so you can see some of the savings that we get by having that feature.
Yep, absolutely.
It's great because sometimes students they'll hit print and nothing happens. They'll hit print again, and they may hit print 20 or 30 times. And so before PaperCut, you would get 300 pages coming out of some of our printers, and the toner in the printer was more expensive than the copy machine. So this cuts that piece down. So
Absolutely.
I think we saved 0.27 of a tree last month, like 27% of a tree we saved last month.
Any other questions for?
Would that be another, that is the copy printing services contract or lease, whatever? Are you envisioning that to also trigger the board's $50,000 purchase policy?
I believe so. I think, we haven't seen any numbers from any of the vendors yet, but I'm anticipating that it'll be close, if not a little over that. So,
We don't have to seal bid out the copiers, because each copier is less than 50,000. So even in total, we still have to do our board policy, and just get pretty close on it. So we'll tentatively do that, but we don't have to get sealed bids and collect those. So we talked to our legal counsel on that.
all right, I will turn it over to Mr. Hartman for his section.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moore.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So I'll go over my proposal for a project. It's the AI phone. So this is our intercom system that we currently use at all of the offices in the school. This is what they use to buzz in at the front and back doors at both buildings. Currently, it's no longer supported. It's well over 20 years old. They don't sell parts for it anymore. There are blind spots. You can see right there, there's a photo of me at the camera. This is what Ms. Connor sees, and someone can just buzz in without you even seeing their face. So that's just another bad feature. It fails to unlock doors. Currently, they gotta shake it really, really hard to get the buzzer to work. So it's just old technology just failing as it goes. And it does not record unlocks. So right now, our current system bypasses the door system. It does not engage with Linnell, our door software that manages our fobs. So every time they buzz somebody open, we're not recording that. We don't know when a door is unlocked versus unlocked. The new system I'm proposing we're getting, it'll connect over Ethernet. It's improved coverage with cameras built in and better audio and video capabilities. It'll improve redundancy and coverage through the offices. With this, we could have non-office secretaries buzz people in. So in coverage times, when things are busy, when people are sick, coverage is easily manageable through their positions. It is compatible with our current door and camera system, so there's no compatibility issues. It'll fit right in with everything, and it'll also match the Village of Cuyahoga Heights' standards as well. So what's going to be done? What I'm proposing is we replace the front and back of the elementary school door comms, the front and back of the high school, middle school. I propose we add the library door that you probably came into right down there. It's currently not covered by any cameras or able to be buzzed in, and that's a very high traffic door. And replace the stations at the secretary's desks with a little monitor that would replace their current little buzzer system that's right there, the one with the red buttons. So they get a nice screenshot, a full, pretty big angle of who's at the door, and they'd be able to engage with them through that buzzer as well. Any questions, comments?
Was this technology through the internet or through a phone line?
It is through Ethernet, so it will go over our network, but even if internet were to go out, it would still function.
Okay. And to Mr. Moore's comment about having the parallel, is it switches? That if we were to go to upgrades on the switches, that there'd be kind of like a dedicated platform? Is that, would these
So it would be on our.
reside on those switches?
Yes, it would reside on those switches, in particular on our security virtual LAN. So it would be under that network, and it would just be matching with all of the other cameras and security systems we have.
And these are replaced in the software, not the software in the cameras, not the physical doors themselves, correct?
No, this will not replace the doors, the latches, the mag strips, or anything like that. This is purely the signal that is being sent and the communication.
So-
Would- I'm sorry, as I said, would fobs need to be replaced, modified, changed?
Nope, nothing would be changed. It's not touching the reader. It's purely the communication and the fact that she could unlock it from a button versus a old button.
So how, right now, do they even see?
So currently in the offices, there are TVs that are displayed where we have security cameras mounted on near the doors. With this system, we'd be able to go off of either keeping the cameras where we have them, so they could get a full view, or we could get a intercom piece that actually has the camera built in. Some of the doors, I'm going to recommend that because there's just no camera over there. The library door in particular does not have a camera covering it, so anyone who comes in here has to wait until they get into the building to be recorded.
And you're talking about replacing the hardware or the objects, the devices, and the service, like the internet service?
Our current system is actually AI phone. It's just the 40-year-old version of it.
Okay, okay. But we would be updating all of that.
Yes, the wiring between would be done, and it would all be done. Yeah, it'd be installation is included in this.
Is obsolescence a factor here, as unlike the conversation we're having about the switches and,
It would be very similar to how it is now, where it would work. It just, at a certain point, it probably wouldn't get software updates, but the functionality would still stay.
any idea what the lifetime would be on that? I mean, this is what, 40 years old, so.
Yeah, this is an old system here. So this would probably, it would last as long as we have it. For software updates, I believe the current one, through quotes I've been getting, is a 5-year plan for software updates. But then after that, you could just renew the agreement or just keep it on the same software version.
We're hopeful that, because we received $50,000 from a safety grant per building, so that's 150 total. We're hopeful that this aligns with that, and so that the cost of this would be completely offset with those safety grants. So we have to sit down and go through the allowable uses of those grants, which we're going to do very soon. So just as they mentioned, the access points and the switches through the E-rate process could be a 50% deduction in total cost. We're hoping that the AI phone would be a complete cost coverage. Copiers not so much, but they're part of doing business, and that's why we're looking to have some versatility potentially with those leases. And we've had such a comprehensive team that has had experiences with different vendors as well as the products themselves. So
And this is going to be an entity on its own, right? So this isn't part of that first $50,000 possible program cost?
You mean, is this gonna be an E-rate?
Yeah.
No.
No, this is totally separate.
Yeah,
So this stands on its own.
Yeah, this is more a security, just technology update
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah,
Any idea what this cost would be?
from the quotes I've been getting, it's going to be around mid-20,000. And we're looking to shave off some costs with that. Hopefully, we're going to look over installation costs and stuff like that, doing it in-house.
any other questions for these two?
What would be the next steps in the progression of these two initiatives? At what point does the board need to get involved in a formal sense, or not? Or is we're going to have further updates before we proceed to next steps, or you proceed to next steps?
We're hoping to get approval from the board to start the bidding process, the sealed bidding process for the wireless access point project, as well as the network switches project.
Okay. And Mr. Herman, on your piece?
I'm currently in the process of getting quotes. As usual, the supply chain and all that, everyone's saying a couple months out, so the sooner the better. I'm predicting probably March would be the earliest I'd have everything like finalized and ready to present to the board.
Great, thank you.
And you're anticipating that it's going to be less than $50,000, so we don't have to do bids on that.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be less than 50. From the quotes from some of the vendors I've seen already, it'll be around mid-20s.
But you are going to try to look at different vendors and things
Oh
like
yes,
that.
I'm gonna get 3 vendors, 3 quotes, the whole, everything.
Are there any, and I don't want to delve too much into things that might cross into our safety plan, but are there any ingress or egress points that we as a district are going to be focused on that we haven't previously from a perspective of, for example, cameras?
Yeah, I think that's all part of the discussion as we continue to look at the state of the facilities here. Obviously, anytime we can improve safety by
Right.
creating layers of barriers between, but without compromising some of the aesthetic value of the building. So those are all conversations that are going to be had and have been had. I know we've talked about such things. But this is something that's really been needed as the hardwired system is getting more and more difficult to keep up with. AI phone is the official product of the Cleveland Hopkins Airport. So if you've ever been in a parking deck and you see the 911 poles and you go push a button, AI phone runs all that security for Hopkins Airport. That's probably their biggest local vendor. They're also Aurora Schools and Brexville Broadview Heights are 2 schools that use the AI phone system.
I went and toured Aurora, Don Zork's previous district. She's the one that recommended the system, so that was the inspiration for it. Went and got a demo of the school district, saw the use, really liked it, and I thought it'd fit very well here.
You do any competitive bidding with other companies, or do you? just go straight to-
Yeah, I'm going through 3 vendors right now, just trying to, all state pricing, all that.
Okay, good. We keep hearing about and this is a slightly different subject, but it's still related to security. Keep hearing about the fire alarm system that breaks down on a regular basis. Are we looking into that in any way, shape, or form?
We've had conversations about that as well.
Okay.
I know one of the things that we're going to do is have GPD come back in and kind of give a comprehensive summary of all of the different systems that they've done, various projects or bid out various projects, kind of like the state of the facilities from like the roof projects, the fire system, the security system, eventually the hill study, the pool study, all those things we would like them to come out and kind of give a summary of everything that they've done beyond just the overall facility study. So they've done more specificity. So the fire alarm has been part of that discussion. Yeah. It's all coming.
Great, stay tuned.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentations, very comprehensive. Appreciate it. Look forward to more information. Okay, we can now proceed to agenda item 4. My screen will catch up to me. And let's come to comments from the public. So I'm going to read this statement as I did at the last meeting. The Cuyahoga Heights Local School District Board of Education feels that public participation in board meetings is a valuable way to receive input from community members. The board will not enter into debate or discussion on any matter brought forward. Instead, the information will be forwarded to the proper individual for possible follow-up. Those who wish to participate in the public comments section of the agenda must sign in on the sheet available at the entrance to the meeting. I see that this evening's is blank. Those signed up to address should limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes until the total time of 30 minutes is used in accordance with our local policy 0169.1 and ORC 121.22. With that, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 5, Treasurer's Business. Mr. Muggio.
Thank you, Mr. Dobbins. Tonight I was going to start something new along with Mr. Young and Mr. Evans. We were going to roll all of our items into the consent agenda. So if anybody were to ask, we can always, switch it up from there, but going forward, we were gonna, if I have 5 items, I'll just read the consent agenda as approval, and we can talk if anybody has any questions on any of those items. So tonight, if we look at 6A, motion to approve the treasurer's business consent agenda motions, which would just be 5A.
Just to elaborate, the only item under that purview or under that heading would be the approval of the minutes? Is that
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, great. Okay. So, would we open it for a motion then, correct, Mr. Muccio? Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the treasurer's consent agenda items, please? Which in this case is the one item approval.
Moved.
Okay, Ms. Etter moves, a second?
It was these two.
Come on. Okay. Ms. Decker seconds. Is there a discussion? Okay. Hearing none, let's move to vote then.
Was that Stephanie? You moved first?
I
Maria?
moved.
Oh, okay, you work it out. So
All
Ms.
right,
Prowse and Ms. Decker.
Got it. Ms. Prowse?
Aye.
Mrs. Decker?
Aye.
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki?
Aye.
Mr. Devens?
Aye, the motion passes 5-0. Mr. Muccio, discussion, comment, please.
Yep, have some good news to discuss right here. So, we applied for and received the American Rescue Plan Homeless Targeted Support Grant with the award of $16,500. So, some examples of funding for this grant include creating a mentorship program, professional development, supplementing transportation, and establishing a space for students to access school supplies, clothing, and other education-related needs. So this was a competitive grant. Mr. Evans, Mr. Young, and myself, we sat down, completed the application, submitted it, and we won. And we received $16,500. So this is a 2-year grant, this school year and next school year, and we have some good examples of what we can place those funds for into the future for those specific purposes that we have. And if we don't use it, it goes back to ODE.
Is that the amount total or per year?
Total.
But you have
Total.
2 years to use it.
Correct.
Very good. Well, thank you for your hard work to shake the trees and come up with these additional funds.
I think this is wonderful. I know from past discussions that this is necessary in our district as well, so I hope we can give some people the help that they need.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Muccio. Do you have any other comments?
That's it for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Keep up the good work. Mr. Young, Mr. Young, please, Superintendent's business.
I'll try to follow Mr. Muccio here. I'd like to make a motion to approve the superintendent's consent agenda as presented in, looks like only 8A tonight.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to approve item 8A. May I have a second? I'll second it. Is there any discussion, Mr. Young?
Would you like me to elaborate more?
Yeah, if you'd care to. if you
Yeah,
think
the
it
only
needs to
item
be.
tonight, so, yeah, since you asked, I would be glad to. Bartholomew Hahn has tentatively, upon approval tonight, accepted the mechanic position on a 1-year limited contract. That position has been vacated since late December, when Mr. Blados took a position with the Brooklyn Heights Village. So, as we've talked before, mechanics are high in demand, those that actually have school bus experience. So feel like he is from all of his recommendations, when the State Highway Patrol Inspector says the 2 best people he's ever worked with in Northeast Ohio are Jim Zerbola, who we have, and Bart Hahn, who we hope to have starting on February 22nd. It's a huge compliment to say that we have people who are not only competent, but get the job done based on what the auditor, so to speak, of the Highway Patrol says. So he has the potential to really, I think, take us to another level in our program.
Very good. So just to clarify, and I'll make sure we do this right. So I'm going to restate or make the motion to approve agenda item number 8, which is the approving employment of a replacement of a new bus mechanic. So may I have a second from someone else in our team?
Second.
Ms. Etter seconds. So we now move to a vote.
Mr. Devens?
Aye?
Mrs. Etter?
Aye.
Mrs. Decker?
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki?
Aye.
Ms. Prowse?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Young, do you have any items for discussion or comment this evening?
Yeah, we had spoken I believe it was late last week, about maybe the need to give a little bit of an update of where we have been with our BEST committee, because our BEST committee has served multiple purposes over the years, and back in 2016 they really shifted their focus towards continuous improvement of facilities, of safety, and several surveys were done at that time that helped us get the ball rolling there. Back in 2017, the district began working with GPD. It's an architecture firm that helped us develop a list of facility recommendations, as well as the costs that were associated with those recommendations. In 2018, the BEST committee then took those recommendations and prioritized. We saw in the presentation a couple weeks ago, we saw some of the photos of the large white paper that, no, I wasn't there, this was my 2-year hiatus, but I heard that was a fantastic meeting down in the cafeteria that was facilitated by Mr. Zwisler, and the BEST committee did a wants and needs determination at that time. In 2019 and then in 2020, that work had progressed, and you'd gone to, I believe, 2 out of the 3 villages and attended village hall meetings to kind of give a state of the schools from a facilities as well as an operations perspective. And then in March of, I believe it was March 13th of 2020, we shut down for COVID. And that, in essence, disrupted our work for the next 3 years. We still were able to finish some projects or begin some projects. So for example, the roof project above the middle school, high school cafeteria, that was part of a continuous roof replacement plan, and Trimco was able to finish that. I believe that was last summer. We'd actually secured the supplies, a lot of the supplies the year before, and stored them in our own facility so that we could get them at that current cost at the time, and then a year later, we're able to get that roof replaced. And then we've used those ESSER funds to replace 6 HVAC unit vents over at the elementary school. They have finished phase 2. They have just phase 3 now, and that is to get them operational for air conditioning, which will happen beginning in March and should finish up by April. It usually doesn't get terribly hot until May around here, so they should be fully operational by the time the mercury hits 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Our boiler system, I know we have a local company. Mr. Dalton does a great job of helping maintain our boilers, and yes, we have aging pipes, and some of you got to see some of those aging pipes on our facilities tour, but they've been replaced on an as-needed basis during that time. And then when I came back to Kaga Heights, was amazed to see, not in a good way, that the band room wall had started separating from the rest of the building. And so, one of the benefits of being in COVID was we could bring that crew in and actually get that wall pulled back into line with the rest of the building and secured without major disruption to students and staff. So that all happened during COVID. Last school year, 21-22, we got the band back together with the BEST committee, this time with Mrs. Lord Garrett as the facilitator, as Mr. Zwisler decided it was time to ride off into the sun, and literally, right? But we shut down again, if you remember, that 21-22 school year, right around winter break, we were starting to see another spike in cases, and really we felt it was best not to tempt fate at that point. We never got back together last school year. All right, so this year we're trying it again. We've had much more success this year. We're currently in the process of looking at our facilities with a bigger microscope. Mr. Muccio did a fantastic job first time, and then reviewing the second time the 5-year forecast and what that means with respect to operational funds. And then we had GPD come out, and they did a side-by-side analysis of what the costs for renovation, based on their audit of the facilities, was in 2019, and how that price had jumped really almost like 75% as a result of inflation, as a result of supply chain. And they showed the trends are pretty consistent. The graphical trends are consistent all over the country, no matter what city you picked. We saw the same trends happening. And unprecedented rise in costs. Fortunately or unfortunately, fortunately for them, unfortunately for people who need to build and renovate, the cost is the cost. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves now. We're waiting for GPD to come back out. We're going to contact them. They emailed us today. We want them to come out and give the final analysis of the Hill study that was conducted. We want them to put it in their terms, put them in terms that I can easily understand, not send me an 80-page document that has graphs and parts per billion of this and parts per trillion of that. Just tell me what the damage is, man. So we're going to have them get in contact us really soon to provide us with a kind of a comprehensive presentation of what the Hill study says. Funding and sources are always considered. Mr. Mucci has done a fantastic job. Mr. Evans has done a fantastic job with planning, with finances, as well as the facilities. Kind of next up for the BEST committee, we're going to take that priority list, that nice big spreadsheet. We're going to look at all 3 of our buildings, and we're going to look at those things that were classified as priority needs, those things that back in 2019 had maybe a 1 to 5 year shelf life with respect to action. So we're going to take those, and we're going to have the BEST committee members go through and prioritize them. Of the things that are the highest priority, is it the highest of the highest, or is it at the bottom of the highest? And we're going to look at then the cost associated with those things, and it's going to be interesting to see everybody's perspective and what comes out of that. We're going to continue to work to develop plans for finances and facilities, both for the short term, but also for the long term. So we want to make sure that we have data that informs that. We want to make sure we've got community input and feedback, as well as adequate communication from our part. So I know that's why we had spoken about the opportunity to kind of give the community a little bit of an update of what the BEST committee has been doing. We have a timeline that's in place. We once again hope to get out to the Village Hall meetings sometime this spring. I know Mr. Evans is chomping at the bit to get back out here, back behind this microphone. And that's going to happen, I think, pretty soon, as early as Friday, I think. So all of our plans will then really start taking off at that point. We'll continue to provide more updates as they come in.
Thank you, Mr. Young, and I appreciate your and the administrative team's willingness to bring forward the BEST committee summaries. Those are very important meetings, and I'll say to anyone who's listening to this meeting that cares to attend, those BEST meetings are very focused and very informative. So for people that are interested in the district's current physical state, as well as areas that might need some upgrading or improvements, those BEST meetings are very timely and very helpful. So with that background, that's why I was hoping that we could use this segment of our board meeting as another vehicle or forum for us to get the word out to people that might not have had the time to attend a BEST meeting or have read into the other periodicals that update the situation, to hear from you, the administrative team, about what the BEST committee is doing and where they're at and what their next steps are. And I appreciate your taking the time tonight to get it out there. I understand there's no one in the audience tonight, but on the other hand, there may be people that would be listening to the meeting, and to those people, I issue an invitation to attend the BEST committee
Yeah, and I
meetings.
appreciate the people who came out for the 2 facilities tours that we did. And we are certainly willing to do more in the future, because I know timing is everything, but we have about 12 to 15 on that Saturday, and we had a completely different 12 to 15 on the following Tuesday night. We did about a 90-minute tour of the facilities, and I think it's similar to that. There are pictures that when you look at it one way, it looks like a very beautiful person, but then when you look at it another way, it looks like a hag or an ogre, and you're like, wow, I never saw that before. You tend to see the beauty that you're looking for, type of thing, and it's a very beautiful building with a lot of character and history, but needs quite a bit of TLC as well.
Very good summary. Thank you again for doing that.
Mark, just saying, moving on to a point that you made, maybe we need to publicize those BEST committee meetings a little bit more, maybe through Tom's Talks and maybe through the village newsletters that they put out every month.
Okay.
Especially if we want to invite the public on one of these tours as well. Because they are very crucial, and as you said, a lot of good information comes out of it, and it's information that needs to be shared in our community as we move forward with these projects.
Good idea, thank you.
Will do.
So, Mr. Young, do you have any other comments on behalf of the superintendent this evening?
I do not.
Okay, well, thank you for what you've done thus far. I'm moving on to agenda item number 11, it's a board business resolutions. There's 2 items on there. And we have also number 12, a board consent agenda approval motion. So I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the board's consent agenda items. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Ms. Decker seconds. So, could we go back then and talk briefly about items 11A and 11B, which I believe parallel the presentations that we had this evening? Mr. Young, do you have, or Mr. Mucci, do you have, that's my understanding is of what.
Yep. Yes, so according to our policy 6320, we are soliciting the bids because these 2 projects that we have are in excess of $50,000. They're upwards of almost 300 some thousand.
Combined.
Combined.
Yeah, $300,000.
Now, these.
Before the E-rate, 50%
Right.
discount.
Correct, so these fall under our policy for improving the building. So we would have to take it out to what's called sealed bid. So we're doing the sealed bid process. We have RFPs as those attachments there. So we're going to release the RFPs via the motion. Tomorrow, we're going to advertise in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. We're going to advertise on our website. We've discussed that. And then we have a timeline on the first page of those proposals, if we were to look at it, just to see what that's going to look like. And we're going to open the bids on a certain day, and we look to have everything in place for an approximate March of 2023 award for these projects. So as Robert was saying, we're doing them concurrently with the E-rate program in place for these replacement proposals.
So what's driving the need for us as a board to consider this matter tonight? I mean, the presentations were very helpful, but we don't have to vote on those proposals. What we have to vote on as a board is to basically observe our purchasing policy for items over 50,000. And we currently expect that each of these 2 purchases would individually exceed $50,000.
Yes.
And that's why we're considering 2 separate motions for, basically to grant authority to solicit bids. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood, the next steps, and so we're going to consider that.
Did you want to explain why the copier machine
Yes.
is not, the copy machine agreement would not be on here?
Right. According to the policy, it doesn't have anything to do with the buildings whatsoever, and those amounts for a single item of equipment are under $50,000. So that's the distinction between copiers and these access points, Wi-Fi networks that we would have and switches that we see. So they're to improve the buildings for a cost over $50,000, which falls under our policy. So we'd have to have board resolution, sealed bids, just in case we get audited to show that we've followed our board policy in the process that we have for this. Now, those copiers, so the cost will be more than that. Between a 3 and 5 year lease, could be upwards of $90,000. In total, about $20,000 per year. But because each one of the copiers is less than $50,000, we'll still get competitive quotes and quote it out. But we don't have to seal bid and have that process, and have it noted in our board agendas via resolution that we have.
So would that be more analogous to the situations where we as a board consider items that are purchased above $5,000?
Yes.
There's 3
Yep.
bids, you
Yep.
typically add those quotes to a
Yep.
weekly agenda, and okay.
Yeah, think of it in kind of different segments. So above 3,000, we get 3 quotes, but the board only sees above 5,000. And the board approves everything over 5,000. We get 3 quotes for everything with our quote sheets. Above 50,000, we do board resolution for certain items that, deal with, repairing, improving, construction of buildings that we would see for that. Now, there are some other ones that, like the copier, total cost is over 50,000, but each copier in and of itself is under that. So we wouldn't have to seal bid it, we're still gonna get 3 quotes on it.
Okay. Very good. Are there any- Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just have one question. So I'm looking into, it says request for proposal, and in each time for the network switches and for the access points, it says Arista on here. Is that just for the one vendor, or that we have to ask for the proposals for other vendors too?
On the E-rate 470 form, it asks you what's your preferred vendor. You can choose Cisco, you can choose Arista. In this case, with our research that we've done, we decided to go with Arista. Anybody who has that product is allowed to bid, so we're not picking the vendor, we're just picking the manufacturer. But anybody who resells Arista can then bid. I've even seen some manufacturers contact me and said, hey, we see that you put Arista, we're still gonna put our bid in even though we don't match that criteria.
Okay.
But that's what we're looking for, is that specific.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't just narrowing in just on this one, and making it seem like it was a foregone conclusion that, but you're telling me it's the product.
Right, yeah.
And now we look for the vendor who supports those products.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's coming from the line item on E-rate 470 form where they're saying, which manufacturer do you prefer?
Okay. So you're following the guidelines that you're supposed to, and very good, thank you.
And if anything, we hope we have as many Arista bids as we can get, because that's gonna drive down price and make the competitive process even more competitive.
And hopefully that'll happen, and we'll have a good choice.
And one reason why this may not be a common item that we see on the board agenda to do these is because, let's take the roofing project, for example. Now, that was about $190,000. We actually went through a cooperative purchasing program, and that purchasing program had already seal bid out that. So that's why we haven't seen it. So if we go with a cooperative purchasing program, they essentially do this requirement that by law, schools have to follow.
Like the school buses, yes.
School
But that
buses, we
doesn't,
did the same.
this doesn't fall into that category.
For what?
Yeah, these did not go
The
through
switches and
Ohio
the-
Schools
Right,
Council.
we didn't go through Ohio Schools
State-
Council.
Right.
it's not
Yeah,
state
no cooperative
pricing.
purchasing program, we're doing it on our own.
Okay.
So, there's a little bit more work doing it on your own as opposed to going through, Ohio Schools Council cooperative purchasing program in which they do all that work for you, so.
But it's good that we have our person in-house
Oh, yeah.
doing it, because this is, you know, who's gonna be ultimately responsible for the service.
Yeah, Robert
So-
did a fantastic job with both RFPs. He was our point person for it, so just gave him the shell and he ran with it and did a fantastic job.
Yep.
So, thank you.
And the E-rate process is so strict, and we were able to take a lot of that and carry it over to our own bidding process. They really run together congruently very well.
All right,
Very good. Are there any other questions or discussion items about these two
let's go to it. Let's get it
proposals,
done.
these two purchase proposals? Anything else? Okay, hearing none, we can move to a vote then, please.
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye?
Ms. Prowse.
Aye.
Mrs. Decker.
Aye.
Mrs. Etter.
Aye.
Mr. Suchaki.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone, for your help in moving this project along. I'm moving on to item 13, board discussion committee reports, comments. I have one item this evening, and that is, Mr. Mucci and I talked earlier today about possibly scheduling a finance committee meeting. That again, this would coincide and be hopefully another forum for interested community members to hear and participate in the capital improvements, PI, part of this initiative that we're undertaking. Do you have a particular date in mind? I think we talked about perhaps trying to precede the next board meeting.
Yeah, if possible, the 22nd of February, around 5:30.
Yeah, that would work for me if it would work for others. So we can send out invitations and notice that. Are there any other committee reports? Mr. Suchaki, was there a IT meeting? That was the last board meeting? We just sort of summation?
What we saw today is the same thing that we
Gotcha.
reviewed in the technology meeting last, 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
The only other thing, and I think I mentioned this last week also, is the reason we're meeting tonight is that I will be in Columbus on Wednesday for the ACTE, which is I don't remember what the A stands for, Career and Technology meeting with legislators to see what might be coming down the road for the Career Center and the other career centers. So I'll have a report on that next time.
Very good. Any other committee reports, discussion items among board members?
I just wanted to say a couple congratulations to some of our achievers out there. Congratulations to our mock trial team. It was exciting to see they're all new to the team, and they had an outstanding competition, bringing them the right to advance to regionals. So I'm wishing them well in their next competition later this month. And congratulations to Michael and Jeffrey Durbin and the first and second place winners in the Ohio Business Professionals of America regional competition as well, giving them the opportunity to compete on a state level next month. You know, we hear about, good, I'm glad about that too, but I'd like to sometimes highlight some of the things that are going that are not athletic achievements that we have. So just congratulations to those group of students.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there's no other comments or discussion items, I will move on to agenda item 14, which is future agenda items. And what I would note is, or just point out to the board this evening, is that we need to think about rescheduling our May 10th work session. We don't have to do that this evening, of course, but time is short and May will be here before we know it. So I had asked everybody to take a look at your calendars and see if the preceding Wednesday, May 3rd, would be a date that we could use to substitute instead of the May 10th meeting. So I'm proposing to move the May 10th work session to the preceding Wednesday, which would be May 3rd. And I don't know that that conflicts with any previous board meetings. I think that might, that we have at least a 2-week gap for that.
That would be fine for me.
Okay. You can just kind of, we have time to work on that, but I thought we'd get that out there now and get people talking about it, and if we need to move the schedules around, we can. My preferences here is with so many very important initiatives that we as a board are needing to consider, my hope and my preference is that we could schedule our meetings so that the 5 of us are present to consider some of the matters that we need to consider probably into the late summer at the earliest. So that's, ordinarily, I think it's not unusual to have a board member miss a meeting here or there, but I think the preference this particular year, 2023, is to try and accommodate everyone's schedule so that we can have the 5 of us present, or at least available. So we'll pick up that conversation perhaps next meeting. Also, we will, as a board, need to think again about rescheduling our June and the July meetings. There's 2 in June and 1 in July. Right now, it looks as though perhaps the preceding Wednesday and the following Wednesdays would seemingly resolve the scheduling issue, but I ask you to take a look at your calendars, and I know it's still early, and people haven't made their vacation plans yet, so just take a look at it and let me know what works for you. I don't have anything else. Does anyone else have anything else to the group this evening? If not, I'm going to move on to agenda item 15A. It should be noted the Board of Education members received their agendas several days prior to the actual meeting. Thus, they've had considerable opportunity to study, ask questions, etc. Upcoming regular meetings, item 15B, Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 at 7 p.m., Wednesday, March 8th at 6 p.m., Wednesday, March 22nd, 7 p.m. and Wednesday, April 5th at 2023 at 6 p.m. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
So moved.
Mr. Strachey moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll second it. Any discussion? If not, then let's move to a vote.
Mr. Soucek?
Aye.
Mr. Dobbins?
Aye.
Mrs. Decker?
Aye.
Mrs. Zenner?
Aye.
Ms. Press?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. It is 7:17 p.m. and we are adjourned.
Very good.
It's probably something to do it.
Covered a lot of stuff in an hour and a quarter.